The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, but his calm voice could not soften the weight of what he was about to say. The room smelled of old wood and paper, a quiet place meant for order, not chaos. Ayan Rahman sat upright, hands locked together, still dressed in black from the funeral. His father had been buried 7 days ago, yet grief still pressed on his chest like a stone. Across from him sat his sister Sarah, eyes red and unfocused. And beside her, their mother Farah, unnaturally still. "There is one final condition in Mr. Rahman's will," the lawyer said. "Before any inheritance is released, a DNA test must be conducted between the deceased and both children." The words cut through the silence like glass. Ayan blinked, certain he had heard wrong. His father had been a private man, strict, orderly, never dramatic. This made no sense. He turned toward his mother, expecting anger, confusion, denial, anything. Instead, Farah's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes dropped to the floor. In that moment, something shifted inside Ayan. Grief cracked open and let doubt rush in. Sarah laughed nervously, shaking her head. "This is some kind of mistake," she said, though her voice trembled. "Why would Dad?" The lawyer did not interrupt. He only waited. 3 days later, the results arrived. Ayan stood near the window as the lawyer read them aloud. The sky outside was gray, heavy with clouds, matching the feeling in his chest. He heard the words clearly, yet they felt unreal, like lines from someone else's life. "Sarah Rahman is not biologically related to the deceased." Sarah made a sound that was half gasp, half sob, then folded into herself. Farah cried out and reached for her daughter, but Sarah pulled away, her face pale with shock. Her whole life, her name, her place, her certainty collapsed in seconds. Ayan did not move. He felt cold, steady, almost empty. His eyes were locked on his mother. "Explain," he said. At home later that night, the truth spilled out in broken sentences and tears. Farah sat at the dining table, hands shaking as if the past had finally caught up to her. She spoke of a time before marriage, before promises, before children. She spoke of fear, of pressure, of choosing safety over honesty. Sarah was born, and the lie was sealed. Ayan's father had found out years later how she never said, but he stayed. He raised Sarah as his own. He never exposed her. "He forgave me," Farah whispered. "He loved her. He loved both of you." Ayan felt his heart harden. Forgiveness sounded noble, but it tasted bitter now. "You let him carry that alone," Ayan said, "for decades." Farah wept, unable to answer. That night, Ayan sat alone in his apartment, lights off, memories flashing like sharp images. His father coming home late, his quiet moods. The way he sometimes looked at Sarah with something unreadable in his eyes, all made sense now. The distance, the sadness, silence. The will was not a mistake. It was a final act his father had. Waited until death to speak the truth. Not to punish Sarah, but to expose Farah, to make sure the lie did not survive him, to make sure someone finally felt the weight he had carried. Ayan's grief twisted into anger. He thought of how carefully Farah had lived her life, respected in the family, admired by friends, never questioned. She had built everything on a lie and never paid the price. His father had paid it instead with silence. With years of quiet pain, Sarah was innocent, caught in the middle, shattered by a secret she never chose. But Farah had chosen. Every day for 35 years, she had chosen to stay quiet. Ayan stood and walked to the window. The city lights blurred as his eyes burned. "This isn't over," he said to the empty room, for the first time since the funeral. He felt something stronger than grief. Purpose. His father was gone, but the truth he left behind was alive, sharp, and unfinished, and Ayan knew exactly who it was meant for. Ayan woke the next morning with a burning determination he couldn't ignore. Sleep had offered no comfort, only endless replaying of the revelation. He walked through the empty apartment, touching the surfaces of his life as if the objects themselves could tell him what to do next. His father's calm justice haunted him, a standard he wasn't sure he could live up to. Yet anger surged, fierce and insistent, demanding action. His mother had spent decades hiding the truth. Sarah had spent decades in innocence, yet now she was broken. Someone had to pay not Sarah, not the innocent, but Farah. She had built a life on lies. She had lived as though no one would ever discover her secret. Now discovery had come, and Ion felt the pull to make it count. He started quietly, small steps at first, records old letters, birth certificates, school files. Anything that could piece together the 35-year lie. He moved carefully, knowing Farah still had influence, knowing that one misstep could blow up everything he was trying to do. He discovered timelines that didn't match small inconsistencies in her stories, things she had long buried. Each detail was a spark, feeding the fire of his desire for justice. He imagined confronting her with the truth, making her finally feel the weight she had imposed on their father and Sarah. He imagined the satisfaction of seeing her crumble under the reality she had evaded for decades. Yet, beneath that, a gnawing thought lingered. Was this truly what his father would have wanted? Ion found himself pacing at night, replaying the past. He remembered his father's quiet demeanor, the subtle sadness that hung in the house, the way he would watch Sarah with a pride that seemed tinged with something else. Was it resignation, sorrow, forgiveness? The more Ion thought, the more complicated it became. Revenge seemed simple, but the morality of it tangled his thoughts. The anger whispered in his ear constantly. Yet another voice, a quieter one, reminded him of restraint. Revenge could satisfy the mind briefly, but could it undo the years of pain his father had silently endured? Could it repair Sarah's shattered sense of self? Despite doubt, he continued. He tracked down the man from Farah's past, Sarah's biological father, now a quiet, retired man living far from the chaos of their family. When confronted, the man trembled. He had no idea the child he had unknowingly fathered had been raised by someone else. His fear was palpable, his guilt immediate. Ion watched the man shrink, realizing that exposure alone could cause real damage, but that only hardened his resolve. Farah had hidden, avoided consequences, and the man had remained ignorant. Justice, Ion told himself, demanded he act. He reached out to friends of the family, neutral parties who could validate the inconsistencies he had uncovered. Each conversation added pieces to the puzzle, and each piece made Farah's carefully constructed life seem more fragile. He imagined a public revelation, one that would make the world see her as he now saw her. A woman whose choices had harmed not just her child, but the man who had loved her despite everything. The idea of it thrilled and scared him. He envisioned the shock, the gasps, the whispered conversations among relatives and neighbors. He imagined Farah facing the judgment she had avoided for decades. Still, Ion could not shake the doubt. He thought about Sarah constantly. She had already been betrayed once, not by him, but by life and circumstance. He didn't want to harm her further. Her eyes haunted him wide, fragile, uncertain. Every plan he made had to avoid breaking her. Again, but the path to justice seemed inevitably lined with pain. He wrestled with it nightly. He imagined confronting his mother, speaking words designed to wound and expose. And then imagined the aftermath: Sarah's pain, Farah's humiliation, the ripple effect on the extended family. Was revenge worth the cost? Late nights turned into early mornings as Ion drafted letters and arranged meetings, imagining the perfect scenario. He wanted everything revealed in a way that could not be denied, backed by facts and evidence. Remember? Emotional claims, no accusations without proof. The weight of responsibility pressed down. He knew that a single mistake could make him the villain in the story rather than the seeker of justice. Yet the thrill of control, the ability to finally dictate the consequences, was intoxicating. He also reflected on his father's approach. The man had carried the knowledge quietly, had endured betrayal without lashing out, had chosen love and patience over vengeance. Could Ion follow in those footsteps? Or was he destined to let anger dictate his actions? The moral struggle consumed him. He found himself writing in journals, noting down every thought, every plan, every emotion. Each entry revealed a man torn between rage and restraint, justice and cruelty. He questioned whether revealing the truth would truly repair what had been broken or simply spread the pain further. Sarah confronted him one evening, her voice quiet but steady. "Whatever you're planning, it won't fix me. It won't fix any of this. And it won't change what's been done." Her words pierced him, forcing him to pause. She was right. Exposure could bring temporary satisfaction, but it would not heal her. It would not bring back the years lost. Her vulnerability reminded him that revenge might serve his anger, but it could destroy the very people he wanted to protect. He realized that his fight was not only against his mother's deception, but also against the darker parts of himself, the parts that wanted to see someone else suffer, to feel relief. Yet, despite this clarity, the temptation remained. He could feel it every time he saw Farah, every time he considered the lies she had told, every time he thought of the control she had maintained for decades. He imagined walking into a room filled with family, speaking words that could unravel everything. The idea of her facing public judgment even subtly lingered in his mind like a dangerous promise. The preparation became obsessive. He practiced speeches, organized documents, created timelines. Every detail mattered. Every detail could either ensure justice or bring irreversible harm. Ion also studied human reactions, how guilt manifests, how fear can be controlled, how truth can be weaponized. His analytical side flourished under the tension. He considered multiple outcomes, trying to predict the consequences of each step. Could he expose Farah in private? Would it serve as effective punishment? Or would it merely create resentment and push Sarah further into heartbreak? The questions multiplied, each scenario more complex than the last. The moral maze he found himself in grew denser, with anger and caution battling for dominance. Weeks passed, and the family remained unaware of how close Ion was to acting. He maintained outward composure, attending meals, speaking politely, hiding the storm inside. The contrast between his calm exterior and the storm inside made him feel powerful, yet fragile. As though one wrong word could shatter the careful balance he maintained. He watched his mother, noticing the small signs of guilt and anxiety she could no longer hide. Her fear validated his plan, but also added weight to the decision he would eventually face. He knew that exposure would hurt her deeply, but he also knew it would finally make the secret tangible, something undeniable. Ion wrestled with timing. Choosing the moment for revelation became a psychological game. He wanted maximum impact, yet he feared collateral damage. Each scenario played out in his mind: private confrontation, public exposure, partial revelation. The calculations were endless. He thought about his father again, imagining how he would act. The man had endured betrayal silently, had chosen love and protection over rage. Could Ion match that strength? Could he resist the satisfaction that revenge promised? Despite all plans and calculations, one truth became clear: action could not be taken lightly. The emotional and moral consequences were real, and Ion realized that revenge was a double-edged sword. He could strike, but the wound would cut both ways. The tension between desire and restraint grew daily, making each decision heavier, sharper, more critical. Sleep became restless, and every interaction with his mother and sister felt like testing the limits of a fragile truce. The psychological struggle dominated him, and he knew the climax of this inner battle was approaching. Ion's journey in these weeks had transformed him. He had become a strategist, a watcher, a man living on the edge between anger and morality. The lines between justice and vengeance blurred constantly. Each day, the choice to act or hold back loomed larger. He realized that the story was no longer about Sarah's parentage alone. It was about power, control, moral responsibility, and the consequences of decisions driven by raw emotion. The preparation, the research, the planning, all of it led to one inevitable confrontation. He just did not yet know which path he would ultimately take. The day of the family gathering arrived, and Ion felt a storm of anticipation and dread brewing in his chest. He woke early, pacing through his apartment as sunlight spilled across the floor, casting long shadows that mirrored his mood. Everything had to be perfect. The documents were neatly organized in a folder, timelines meticulously prepared. The letters and records ready to prove the truth beyond dispute. He rehearsed words in his mind, the speech he would deliver that would finally strip away the facade Farah had maintained for 35 years. Yet with each repetition, doubt crept in. Could he really do this? Could he inflict the kind of pain he had been planning for weeks? As he arrived at the house, the smell of fresh flowers and polished wood filled his senses. The family had gathered for a casual Sunday lunch, completely unaware of the tension coiling beneath Ion's calm exterior. Farah moved gracefully, pouring tea and chatting with relatives, her composure a mask that hid guilt and fear. She did not know that Ion held the power to shatter her carefully constructed life in minutes. He watched her, noting the subtle tremor in her hands, the way her smile faltered when she looked at Sarah. That little tremor, unnoticed by anyone else, sent a thrill through Ion. He had the advantage now, and he knew it. He waited for the right moment, standing silently as relatives shared stories and laughter filled the room. The air was warm and bright, completely ordinary, which made the potential chaos he held in his hands feel even more potent. Ion's eyes kept returning to Sarah. She had grown stronger in the past weeks, but the vulnerability in her gaze reminded him of the cost any action could carry. This was why his plan had to be perfect, or else everyone would pay. Finally, he rose. The room fell silent, sensing something had shifted in him. Ion could feel the pulse in his temples, the adrenaline, sharpening his mind. He opened the folder, intending to reveal the documents and timelines, the undeniable proof that would expose Farah. But as he glanced at his mother, the woman who had terrified and deceived them, yet had also survived life's challenges with quiet cunning, a strange hesitation gripped him. She was not a villain in his eyes, not fully. She had made mistakes, yes, but she had also loved and cared, and somehow, that complicated everything. Ion inhaled deeply, the room shrinking in on him. He imagined every reaction, shock, tears, anger, judgment from relatives who had always admired Farah. He imagined Sarah breaking down again, losing herself in the revelation. The thought made his stomach twist. Was this justice, or was it cruelty masquerading as righteousness? The weight of his father's memory pressed on him. His father had known the truth, had carried it quietly, and had still loved both children. What would he have done if he had been in this room? Sarah's voice, soft but steady, broke the silence. "Whatever you're planning," she said, "it won't fix me. It won't fix the past, and it won't make anything better. It will just hurt more people." Her words hit him like a hammer. She was right. Exposure could bring satisfaction, but it could also destroy. And he realized something he hadn't considered. Revenge was not just about the person who had wronged you. It affected everyone around, especially those who were innocent. Ion's hands shook slightly as he lowered the folder. The evidence he had gathered no longer felt like power. It felt like a weapon pointed at the wrong people. He looked at Farah, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea. And he realized she had spent decades living under her own guilt. Public humiliation might satisfy anger for a moment, but it would not erase the past or undo the pain she had. He took a step back. The words he had rehearsed, the dramatic revelations he had imagined, all seemed hollow now. Instead of confrontation, he spoke to Sarah, choosing a path that carried no immediate justice but still offered clarity. He told her about family, about truth, about how lies, even well-intentioned ones, could corrode relationships quietly and painfully. His words were honest, gentle, and careful. They conveyed the gravity of the situation without naming names, without casting judgment in a way that would destroy anyone. Farah looked at him, her face pale and wary, understanding immediately that Ion had made a choice she could not have predicted. He was not going to expose her, not publicly, not cruelly. She had lived with her secret for decades, and now she had to live with the understanding that the truth was known in a quiet, private way. No dramatic scenes, no public judgment, just awareness, and the knowledge that her deception was no longer hidden. The tension in the room dissipated slowly. Conversations resumed, the air still thick but no longer charged with imminent disaster. Ion felt a strange sense of relief, yet it was tempered by a heaviness that would not leave him. He had chosen restraint, not because he had forgiven entirely, but because he understood that the cycle of revenge could perpetuate pain endlessly. His father's wisdom, carried posthumously, had guided him to a different kind of resolution. As the day ended, Ion watched his mother and sister move through the house, their interactions cautious but real. He felt no triumph, no victory, only a complicated calm. The desire for revenge had been strong, but he had resisted it. And in that resistance, he found something unexpected. Control over the outcome, the ability to choose how pain and truth were handled, and a chance to protect Sarah from further harm. Driving home, Ion reflected on the choice he had made. Venge had promised clarity and satisfaction, but it would have left a trail of destruction in its wake. By holding back, he had not erased the betrayal or the years of deception, but he had prevented more harm. The moral weight of the decision pressed on him, yet it was also liberating. He understood that the consequences of actions were never simple, that justice and vengeance were not always the same at home. He sat alone in the quiet apartment, staring at the ceiling. The document still lay untouched in the folder, a symbol of the power he had chosen not to wield. He thought of his father again, imagining the man's calm acceptance of life's injustices, his quiet strength, and the love he had carried despite knowing the truth. Ion realized that revenge, even when justified, could never replicate that kind of integrity or peace. The evening passed without drama. Sarah began to heal slowly, finding fragments of identity she had thought lost. Farah carried her guilt in silence, understanding that the past could not be changed, but that exposure was no longer a threat. And Ion, though unsettled by the events and the knowledge of what could have been, felt a sense of moral alignment he had not anticipated. The confrontation he had imagined never occurred, but in its place came reflection, restraint, and the possibility of moving forward. Ion understood something profound. Revenge is seductive, but it is rarely satisfying in the way one imagines. True resolution, he realized, might lie not in punishing others, but in navigating the consequences of truth with wisdom and careful choice. Walking away from the confrontation had not made the pain disappear, but it had stopped the cycle. And sometimes breaking the cycle was the only victory possible as night fell. He glanced at Sarah, asleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, and felt a quiet hope. The family was fractured but not destroyed. Secrets were out, but love, complicated and imperfect, still existed. Ion understood that the future was uncertain, yet it was real, and it was his choice how he would live with it. The day's tension, the weight of revenge, and the pull of anger had all come to a point of decision. He had chosen restraint. In that choice, he discovered a strange power. The power to control himself, even when others had failed. The storm inside him had passed, leaving only a calm, deliberate clarity. Revenge had been a temptation, a path he almost walked, but the strength he found in restraint defined him more than anger ever could. And as he prepared for sleep, he understood fully that some battles are won not through action, but through the courage to walk away.